Today we're going to talk about demand. So our objective is to understand the law of demand and to identify variables that shift the demand curve. First thing we're going to define is a market. A market is a group of buyers and sellers of a particular good or service. So when you think of market, you just think of everything. You know, you go to the market and you buy all your groceries or whatever. No. So when we're talking about a market, we're talking about only one good or service. Okay, the market for a particular good or service. The buyers and sellers involved with that. That's market. Buyers determine demand for a product. Sellers determine what? Supply. Everybody have it? All right. So what the main model we're going to use for the market is the perfectly competitive market. Okay? Like I said, this is a model. There's no market that is perfectly competitive. But in order to do our analysis, we have to do it in a perfectly competitive market so our results are consistent. There are characteristics that make a market perfectly competitive. These are the characteristics. Number one, the goods offered for sale are all the same. So, in general terms, wheat. Okay, there's not much difference in wheat. Wheat is wheat, right? So that could be a good in a perfectly competitive market. 2% milk. It's all pretty much the same, right? 2% milk is 2% milk. There'd be the market for that. 87 octane gasoline. Pretty much any station you go to, whether it's Speedway or BP or Marathon or whatever, the 87 octane gasoline that you buy is the same. Okay? So those are perfectly competitive goods. Second characteristic, buyers and sellers are so numerous that no buyer or seller can influence the market price. Buyers and sellers are so numerous that no single buyer or seller can influence the market price. Why does a large number, why does that make a difference? I mean, so let's say I'm a buyer and I want to buy gasoline, but I'm only willing to pay $1. What are the gas stations in the area going to say to me when I go in there and say, I'm going to pay $1 for gas? What are they going to say? Yeah, sorry, everybody else is paying $2, so we're not going to sell it to you for $1. Same thing for a gas station. Maybe a gas station, maybe a Marathon decides, well, we want to make more money, so we're going to sell our gas for $3 a gallon. Everybody else is selling it for $2 a gallon. What's going to happen to Marathon? Nobody will buy their gas, right? So they have to charge the market price and pay the market price. 3, buyers and sellers in a perfectly competitive market must accept the price that the market determines. They're price takers. So that's just what I just explained. Okay, 2 kind of leads to 3. Because there's so many buyers and sellers, the buyers and sellers have to be price takers. They have to take the price of the market. They can't set their own price. Fourth characteristic, free entry and exit into the market. We'll get into this more later. But that means if I decide I want to sell gasoline, I can, I have to pay more for my gas pumps and my shop, but there's no other boundary or price on entering the market. I can enter it if I choose freely, and I can enter and exit freely. There's no regulations or laws or somebody doesn't have market power that stops me from having the resources to enter the market, I can freely enter or exit the market. Everybody have all these? All right. Determinants of demand. Now we have to make a careful distinction between demand and quantity demanded. And I'm going to get into that now. Quantity demanded is the amount of good that buyers are willing and able to purchase. It's not just able. They have to be willing. It's not demanded unless they're willing to buy it. I might be able to afford a new car, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to buy one. The car I got right now is paid off. I'm not going to buy a new car until my old car needs to go in the shop too much, right? So I have to be willing and able to purchase. That would be the quantity demanded. The biggest determinant of quantity demanded is price. The price of a good. If Pepsi's for sale for $5 a can versus 50 cents, the quantity demanded is going to be a lot greater when the price is 50 cents than when it's $5. So price is the biggest determinant of quantity demanded. And basically, it's the only one we'll consider for quantity demanded. The law of demand says there's an inverse or negative relationship. So from now on, when we say negative relationship, we're saying if one goes up, the other goes down, right? They're opposite. That's negative relationship or inverse relationship. I like to call it negative relationship between quantity demanded and price. As price decreases, the quantity demanded for a good goes up, and vice versa. As price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. That's the law of demand. Everybody have it? Raise your hand if you're still writing. Now, I wasn't able to make this on the PowerPoint, but with an economist in economics, and when I do this on the board, you don't write out decreases and increases. In economics, you would write this as P arrow up and Q arrow down. Even on the AP exam, they want to see things concise and simple, right? And quick. So if you had to, in your response, you had to say something about the law of demand, you could just write P arrow up, Q arrow down. That means increase and decrease. That's the type of shorthand you can use in economics. It's accepted. Okay, so let me put this up on the board. So we're going to do Joe's demand curve. So on the vertical axis, it's the price of a can of Pepsi in dollar. Okay, so let's call that axis P. And this is quantity of cans of Pepsi x-axis is typically labeled Q. All right, so we have at $5, okay, nobody buys Pepsi. And then if the price is 0, ten people want the Pepsi, right? And then so I draw this is my demand curve, right? We might say at $4, we've got 2 people that would buy Pepsi, or Joe would buy, since this is Joe would buy 2 Pepsis, and at $1, Joe might buy 8 Pepsis. Right. We label the demand curve on your graph. You're going to call this D, and then we have these different points. We've got this point would be Z. We would call this point Y. This is point X. Call this point W. Okay, and so that's what a demand curve looks like. It's downward sloping because of the negative relationship. It has a negative slope. As price goes up, the quantity goes down. As price goes down, the quantity goes up. Negative slope. It's your demand curve. All right, now, typically what happens, I drew the graph first because I want you to see the demand curve and the negative relationship. Typically they give you the demand schedule first. So I'd have this data and then I'd plot my graph. So a demand schedule for this would look like we've got price, quantity demanded, and the alternative. And so we have at $0, we said Joe would purchase 10 Pepsis. That's alternative W. And at $1, Joe purchases 8 Pepsis. And so that's alternative X. At $4, Joe purchases 2 Pepsis. So that's alternative 2. That's quantity demanded 2, alternative Y. And then $5, we had a demand of 0. That was alternative Z. All right. Make sense? Okay, good. So, when there's a change of price, when we change the price from $4 to $1, I'm moving along the curve, right? I'm moving down the curve. So that's movement along the curve. When there's a change in price, okay, and the quantity changes, that's a change in quantity demanded, right? If it's just a change in price. Now, there's other things that shift the demand curve. Okay, if I shift the demand curve, then this curve is D1, this may be curve D2. That's a shift. That's from something other than a change in price. It's when we shift the demand curve, and now we're going to go through the things that can cause the demand curve to shift. The price doesn't change, but the quantity demanded does when we shift the curve. Here, the price changes, so the quantity demanded changes. So shifts in the demand curve. When price is held constant and quantity demanded changes, that's a shift in the demand curve. An example of something that would shift the demand curve. Pepsi makes you healthier. Right? There's a new study. They say Pepsi makes you healthier. All right? Shift the demand curve. It's not going to change the price. It's going to change how much people want. They aren't changing the price. Everybody got it? Distinguish. I'm emphasizing this, as you can tell. A change in quantity demanded is movement along the curve. A change in demand is a shift in the curve. The difference is this word quantity. So if we have a change, if I say there's a change in quantity demanded, we moved along the curve. If I say there's a change in demand, we shift the curve. All right, so variables that can shift the demand curve. We use an acronym TIRES to help us remember this. Okay, so TIRES, think of the word TIRES. When you're trying to think of what's shifting the demand curve, you're trying to figure it out. Think of the word TIRES. In TIRES, T stands for tastes. That example I gave about Pepsi making you healthier, that affects people's tastes, right? So, something is a fad. So, a lot of people want to buy it, or something makes you healthier, or, there's some type of trend, okay? That is taste. Okay? I didn't have any examples there. But that's taste is, everyone understand taste? Change in taste. Okay. Income. With income, a normal good is going to be positive related to income. So if income goes up, the amount of good, the demand for the good would go up with a normal good. There are inferior goods. Inferior goods is negatively related to income. So if with an inferior good, you might be purchasing a good and your income goes up and you might buy something else that costs more. Like a car instead of a bus ticket. If you're riding the bus to work every day, and all of a sudden you get a raise, and you can afford to buy a car, you would buy less bus tickets if your income went up. That would be a negative related good. That would cause the demand curve to shift inward. If demand increases, you shift it outward. Related goods price. The R stands for related goods price. So we have, with related goods, we have substitutes and complements. A substitute. If the price of the substitute goes up, the demand for the good is going to do what? If the price of Coke goes up, what's going to happen to the demand for Pepsi? It's going to increase. All right, it's kind of a tricky. You got to think about it right. It's kind of, people get tripped up on this. For a complement, it's the opposite. The price of a complement decreases, then demand for the goods is going to go up. All right, the price of computers goes down. People would buy more software for their computer with their new computer because they could afford. They could afford to buy more software if the price of the computers goes up. These are complements. Hot dogs and ketchup, right? If the price of hot dogs goes down, you'd buy more ketchup to put on your hot dogs. That type of thing. Substitutes and complements. Any questions there? Expectations. The E stands for expectations. Expectations about income or price. Okay, if I expect, in the winter time, if I go to Ritter's, then they may, because they don't have a lot of business in the wintertime, they may lower their price. So if I think, oh, it's going to be really cold next week, I'll just hold off on buying my Ritter's till next week because the price is going to be lower. Or maybe there's going to be a sale, right? A lot of people, wait to buy clothes in the spring because there's a lot of clothes are on sale in the spring instead of buying them in the winter. Things like that. So expectations can decrease or increase demand. Okay, same thing about income, right? If I'm going to have if workers think that their company is going to, give them a raise at the end of give them a bonus at the end of the year, then they may wait till January to purchase plane tickets. So the demand for plane tickets would go up in January. At a later time, in the current time, demand would decrease or something like that. Expectations about income or price. And then the S stands for size of population. Another way you can think of this is number of buyers. If the number of buyers increases, the demand is going to increase. Immigration is an example for size of population. If we're expecting a lot of people to immigrate in the United States, we would expect the demand for food to go up. Or it doesn't have to be an expectation. If the number of immigrants in the United States goes up, then the demand for food will go up because more people have to eat. All right, now I wanted to put this up. So I put up, this was Joe's demand curve. You need to understand that for the market, demand curve, it's made up of all the individual demand curves. You don't have to put this in your notes. I have to write this down, but I want you to see this. Okay, so if I just graph this first column, the price and then Joe's demand, okay, that would be Joe's demand curve, right? And then I add Susie's demand to Joe's demand. And then, so you can see like at $0, now that Joe and Susie's together, this first point with price of 0 is at 19. I add these two. If the price is $1, that's Joe and Susie together demand 14, so this curve moves out to here, right? So that's how I get the second curve. And then, then the market would just be the sum of all these individual demand curves. That determines the market demand curve. We'll usually work with the market demand curve. But it's made up of individual demand curves adding on to each other. Does that make sense? All right. All right.